Hello everybody, welcome to Illuminations with Tiina and Fi. I'm Fi.
And I'm Tiina. Hi.
Hi. Now this little series we're going to focus on is going to be picking out the writer and research professor Brene Brown, who has had quite a big impact on both Tiina and I. Brene is a really interesting woman. She did a TED talk. It was TEDx actually, so it wasn't the central TED talk, it was TEDx. And she did that, and I've got the dates here, in December 2010. And the theme was the power of vulnerability, because her research, she's a social policy researcher, and her research is all about, it says on here, all about shame, vulnerability, worthiness, and courage. That went completely viral and has had millions and millions of people looking at it. So she then went to TED and did a central TED talk in March 2012, which was listening to shame. And I think that's when I first got to hear of her, was around that time. And she has then written key books that have come from her research. One is I Thought It Was Just Me. The second one is The Gifts of Imperfection. Then she wrote Daring Greatly. And then last year she wrote Rising Strong. And these three are kind of part of a trilogy: The Gifts of Imperfection, Daring Greatly, and Rising Strong. And we thought we'd take two sessions, this session, next session, to have an exploration around what particularly out of her books has had quite an influence on our lives. So I'm going to start and hand over to you, Tiina. So from the Brene books, what's particularly resonated for you, had some shaking around?
I think it's very hard to take one thing because there's so many. But to take one that has been impactful is actually about vulnerability. That vulnerability is not weakness. It takes courage to be vulnerable. And that vulnerability is the birthplace of love and creativity. And I'd like to read just a short passage about that from Daring Greatly, where vulnerability comes into real focus. She writes, "Vulnerability isn't good or bad. It's not what we call a dark emotion, nor is it always light, positive experience. Vulnerability is the core of all emotions and feelings. To feel is to be vulnerable. To believe vulnerability is weakness is to believe that feeling is weakness. To foreclose on our emotional life out of a fear that the cost will be too high is to walk away from the very thing that gives purpose and meaning to living." And I love how that illustrates how vulnerability is at the core of us. And when we're small, we are prepared to be vulnerable. We take chances, and sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. And when we grow up, we learn to armor up, to pretend that there is no vulnerability. And then I guess at some point when we get old enough, we realize that to be ourselves and to live an authentic life and to be wholehearted, which she talks so much about in The Gifts of Imperfection, we have to take the armor off and we have to learn to become vulnerable again. It comes full circle. Yeah, so that's just one of many of the things that I have taken on board in my writing.
And when Brene, what did she learn about people who were more willing to be vulnerable? What did she pick up from? How is that linked into her research?
Well, they live more full lives, really. They live more authentic lives. They get into the arena, as she calls it, and yeah, sometimes they fall down and they fail, and that hurts. Sometimes they succeed. But if you don't dare to be vulnerable, you don't dare to create anything new, or you don't dare to love fully. So you shut off a lot of things if you're not prepared to be vulnerable.
So actually feeling vulnerable is an okay place to be.
It's an okay place to be. It sometimes doesn't feel very okay. It can be scary as hell, And you want to do anything to numb off that. And also, going into a playing field, going into a meeting and knowing that you're going to present a new idea that might not be accepted, just walking in there, it's like, no, I don't want to do it. I'm not going to do it. This is scary. But that doesn't mean that it's not okay to be in that. It's okay to feel fear, and it's okay to feel uncomfortable about it. Yeah.
So it feels like that being vulnerable then is around authentic self, which we looked at already, but is around being true to yourself as well.
Yeah, and also daring to ask for what you need and what you want, and I think that also is in the communication with people, to to ask for things or to communicate from a real place. That can be super vulnerable. I mean, one of the things that she did lots of research and asked people what makes you feel vulnerable, and in a couple relationship, a husband asking her wife to make love, and chancing that she's going to say no, and vice versa, the wife doing the same, can be enormously vulnerable. So it's in so many situations in life where that vulnerability can be awoken.
Okay. And so from vulnerability, from being vulnerable, we can actually grow.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that is absolutely where you grow. Yeah.
And because this comes back to, the one we talked about last time, when you talked about the nugget of communication as part of love. So if you're in a place in a relationship and you're able to express a want, and that expressing of a want makes you feel vulnerable. I'll use an example. For example, if anybody ever described me as being needy, I would really have a challenge. So I've got a belief in me there that I've been working around with, because lately, because of business growing and everything, I've had to ask, for help and support. And actually it's felt really uncomfortable. But actually what it's done is open up incredible opportunities for the people I share my life with to be able to actively support me. And that's been a gift for them and for me. So I hadn't connected that to the feeling vulnerable, but it does feel very vulnerable. Yes, that's when you used that example. But my relationships have then grown from that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So can you think of a time when you've been vulnerable then, and how this has helped you in your world?
Well, let's just go back into relationships. I mean, to actually say to someone for the first time, I'm in love with you, and not knowing if they're going to say it back, not knowing if that's going to scare them off. That's been really scary, and I have said it, and I haven't got it back. And, it's like, whoa, but then it's kind of like, well, I'm offering it up, because I want to say it and not expect anything back. But yeah, that's vulnerable. Absolutely.
And that ties in then with the languages of love, because we know your language of love is words. So actually you saying it to someone, they may show it back to you and not.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Another example is starting doing this illumination series. It's like, oh, this is vulnerable. Like, okay, we're going to be out there doing this. People are going to either listen to us or watch us and think whatever they will think, Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Tiina. Yeah. Okay. Now for me, and I think you're right, because Sharing Greatly is where Brene helps us to understand about feeling vulnerable, and she talks about shame as well, in there. And actually Rising Strong is the kind of the last of the trilogy so far, whether it goes on, maybe, who knows. And this talks about that if you are vulnerable, and if you are out in the arena, which we will probably look at next time, I'm sure, but if you are out there, that you will fall. You will fall. We will get people who write in and don't like what we're doing, and that will happen. And what I love about this book, which this is a really hard book to read, I found. I was reading it on a trip away with someone very close to me, and both of us really, it was like, pulling teeth sometimes walking through treacle. What I love from this is the whole idea of the people who rise strong are those who learn to live with discomfort. And I think that is so brilliant, because so many people, you know, hold back from following their dreams and their heart's desires because the discomfort that can go alongside that, which is natural fear of, you know, because when you are following a dream, there is some notion of fear because you're stepping out, being vulnerable. And it's that discomfort that often can take you back into the place of wanting to be safe. And bizarrely, as you know, I've been reading for my book club, Paulo Coelho, is that how you say it? It's Brazilian. Right, okay. And The Alchemist. And in there, he talks about it beautifully, how when some people get so near the dream and achieving their dream, that's when they give up, because life really wants you to not just get the dream, but actually learn how much you've mastered while you've actually moved towards achieving that dream. And he says, in our words, it's set in a desert idea. It's like people dying of thirst just as they see the palm trees, you know, in the distance, in the horizon. And I think the whole notion of being with discomfort and it being okay has been a massive revelation for me. You know, just knowing that actually I don't need to always be bibbing about, feeling like woo and yeah, and you know, everything's cool. That actually sometimes there is discomfort, which could come from vulnerability. But that's okay. You know, that is okay. And as you know, she talks about storytelling, which is becoming very big, and I'm sure we'll do a illumination about it, because everybody's talking about storytelling. And coming from an Irish family, and my favourite word being Seána Key, which is Irish for storyteller. I love all stories, but she breaks it down into the idea of the story. And you know, the first part is getting to know your story, and then you have to rumble through the story, and then there's the revelation. And she compares it to, you know, like the Pixar. She goes to talk to Pixar and compares it to how they write Pixar. And I was at an event recently, and Susie Greaves, the editor of Psychologies, was talking about storytelling and compared the whole idea to Star Wars, the first Star Wars with Luke. And she talks about the rumble, and that's where it really is the discomfort. Is, you know, you kind of know you've got to go somewhere. You know that actually what you've been using in the past, all those beliefs and armory, etc., actually they're not going to help you really now. You need to change the machinery and change the armor and develop different beliefs. And actually it's the rumble of that, it's that discomfort of like, I always say it's like wearing a completely new outfit and going out in the street. You know, if you're used to flat boots, you put on a pair of high heels and you walk up the street. You know, it's the rumble and the discomfort. So there's that bit, but there's also then the fact that naturally there is discomfort, especially if we're in a place of vulnerability and choosing to feel vulnerable. And that is okay. And those who rise strong, and she found that, didn't she, from her research, that people who just learn that actually a bit of discomfort, that's all right. You know, it's okay. It doesn't mean everything's going to flip over and go into turmoil. It's all right. That's really helped me. Like this morning, I felt so much discomfort. Don't know why. You know, did some breathing, and, you know, was looking forward to seeing you, so focused on all of that, but just still accepted that that's okay, the fact that there's a little bit of rumbling around, you know, there's a lot happening, exciting stuff, so just let it be. Yeah.
I'll just clarify that the storytelling is not telling stories about writing a story about someone else. This is exploring your own story that you're telling yourself in a situation. Yeah. You start... Yeah. You know, you don't see the reality in front of you. You're living according to the stories that you're telling yourself.
Yeah. It's based on the idea of The Hero's Journey by Joseph Campbell, which is kind of like the idea of that, you know, that we are in the middle of our stories. You know, in fact, with a client the other week, we looked at her story so far, and it was amazing when, you know, you get someone to tell their story, especially when they've been in some very dark, challenging places, to talk about where they've come to and look at what was happening at that time and the relevance and the learning and where it's led to now. So, yeah, yes, thank you, Tiina. It's not storytelling as in, although metaphor obviously is important, it is about your own story. Yes, indeed.
Good. I'm not going to ask you any questions about that because you've told us quite a lot about that. But what are our questions for our audience this time, do you think?
Well, what question would you like to ask about vulnerability? Let's put two questions.
Okay. What would I like to ask about vulnerability? Yeah, this one. When do you think that vulnerability has stopped you from doing something that you really wanted to do? Yeah, I'll put that.
Like it. And I'd like to ask, and I'm trying to ask a question and not do a nugget, so that's quite interesting. So it's about, I know what, it's about just notice with curiosity when you have feelings that are slightly uncomfortable. Just notice when they're happening, which might link in very much to what you're talking about. So the two probably will, I'm sure, link together. But for people to notice, so when is it that you are feeling kind of discomfort, noticing that and seeing, you know, what might be happening around and what you might be doing and where you might be going, thinking. Yeah, that's it.
You've been kissing the Blarney Stone again now.
Well, I was halfway doing a nugget and I thought, I don't want to do a nugget. I need to do a question. So, okay.
Yeah.
When is it you actually have feelings of discomfort? When is it you are experiencing, because I don't think it's feelings of discomfort. When are you experiencing discomfort? As we know.
Okay.
When are you experiencing discomfort? Notice what you notice about that with curiosity. That's important.
Okay. Good. Excellent.
So you question are out there and they may well interlink. So thank you very much for that, Tiina.
Thank you. Thanks for those of you watching or listening, whichever version you're doing. And see you next time.
See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.